Howdy cowpokes, this is the Act Man here, and today I'm so excited to finally be making Red Dead Redemption 2 videos. I've kept you waiting a long time, and for good reason, because I got an interview with Roger Clark, the actor who played Arthur Morgan. Big deal, big deal. Naturally, I wanted to wait until I did this interview before posting my review series on Red Dead Redemption 2. I envisioned it's going to be a 3-part series. But yes, I was able to score an interview with Roger Clark as part of him and Tore Olsson promoting this book called Red Dead's History. Roger does the audiobook version as Arthur Morgan, so, you know, you're in for a ride. While I'm sure many of you are familiar with Roger Clark, some of you may not be familiar with Tore. I'll be introducing him later on. I'll be honest, guys, I was a little bit nervous talking to Roger, and it didn't help that I was also having camera issues while we recorded the interview. However, the audio is perfectly intact, and it's just my camera that fucked up. I'm the problem child. The interview also doesn't contain everything he and I said together. And before you ask, yes, Roger did think it was funny, the outfit I was wearing. With that being said, enjoy the interview. What's up, everybody? This is the Act Man here, and today I got a special guest for all you cattle rustlers out there. Today joining me in a discussion about Red Dead Redemption 2 and its history is Tore Olsson.
Hey, what's up, Act Man?
American historian and professor at the University of Tennessee. And, of course, we have the indomitable, the unshaken Roger Clark.
How's it going?
Actor of Arthur Morgan, not just voice actor, full actor.
No, there's still voice acting, but Red Dead wasn't voice acting. At least not our bits, anyway.
I'm, like, so hyped to be here and talk to you guys that, like, I gotta make sure I keep it together, you know, because, I mean, I'm such a huge fan of Arthur Morgan, your performance, Red Dead Redemption 2.
You just gotta be like Dutch. You gotta be confident like Dutch.
Yeah, I gotta channel his persona.
You can do it. And get the odd voice crack in and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing was that Tore reached out because I had streamed Red Dead Redemption 2. I had just played it for the first time this last year, and he reached out and said, you know, hey, I'm working on this book with Roger. He's doing the audiobook version. I was like, this isn't real. This can't be real.
Yeah, it's real, all right. I really enjoyed
Video games and history, you know, meeting in unexpected ways.
Yeah, so, you know, today we're going to talk about that book and a variety of different things. We can kind of just play it by the book. But, Tori, I wanted you to introduce yourself first so that my audience can kind of get an understanding of who you are, where you're coming from, and how you guys found yourselves here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ackman, so much for having us on your awesome channel, for bringing us on. It's a tremendous pleasure to be here. Seeing my book on your little mantle there is pretty thrilling, I gotta say. Yeah, so I'm a history professor at the University of Tennessee. I'm in my campus office right now, so you'll see the sun setting behind me. I study and teach and write about American history since the Civil War, but I'm also a gamer, and I grew up like a hardcore gamer in the late 90s, playing like all the best first-person shooters, especially that came out. Like, I remember the day Half-Life dropped, and I, you know, went to the store, got it, and had my mind blown really, really hard. So, like, I played a ton of video games in high school, but I will shock you guys and tell you that when I got to college, I quit. Like, I quit cold turkey. Like, I realized on day one of college that I couldn't be a student and a gamer at the same time. So I made this really momentous decision of quitting gaming for a really long time.
You're braver than I am.
Well, I'm, you know, like I quit right before Halo came out,
Ooh,
so I never
time.
got to catch that wave, which is a real bummer. But instead, I got serious. You know, like I did well in school. I got a bachelor's degree. I went to graduate school. I got a master's degree. I got a PhD. And then suddenly I'm a college professor teaching American history in Tennessee. And during all these years, this is literally 20 years of my life, I didn't play games. Like I didn't play Halo. I'll confess, I still haven't played Halo, which is kind of embarrassing, but you know, it is.
I'll cut that out. Don't worry. We'll preserve your dignity.
But what convinced me to get back into gaming was the pandemic. You know, the pandemic jolted so many of our lives off of track, and it got me to buy a gaming PC again for the first time in a long time, and to dive back into gaming. You know, at this point, I'm an established professional, and what's one of the first games that I play? Red Dead Redemption 2. And I pick it up just for fun, but I soon realized, as I know you realized, Actman, as well, that this is a pretty brilliant video game. You know, it's incredibly well
There's
written.
something to it.
There's something to it. I mean, it's basically an interactive HBO show, right? That's
Right,
like
yeah.
90 hours long.
Yeah.
It's just got really interesting storytelling and such incredible granular detail. And, you know, I'm not just playing as a video game nerd. At this point, I'm playing as a professional historian who works in this period. I came to realize that though this game is, of course, fictional, it's certainly way more violent than anything that happened in American history, it is not stupid. It showcases many of the big dilemmas in American history. You know, the women's rights movement, the rise of big corporate businesses like the railroads, Leviticus Cornwall, warfare between the native peoples and the U.S. Army. All those are central to the plot of Red Dead Redemption 2. You guys know this very, very well, right? So I had this crazy idea early in the pandemic, like, this game has gotten so many people curious about history. You know, on its own, the game doesn't really teach you the ins and outs and nuances of American history, but it's got a lot of people to ask questions about it. So my crazy idea was, back in 2021, why don't I try to teach a class? Try to teach a college class that uses the fictional content of the games as a way to kind of explore the real dilemmas of violence and, you know, instability in the U.S. in the West.
I remember
in the
that
South.
news story went viral. Professor teaches class on Red Dead Redemption 2. And I think that kind of says something about, like, how deep of a game it is narratively. I mean, because you're just talking about, like, one snippet, one angle of Red Dead Redemption, which is the history and, like, accuracy and what sort of topics of the time that it covers and addresses. And that's not even, like, on the topic of gameplay or anything like that, or greater, you know, narrative themes. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was shocked that no one had tried this before. When I gave it a shot in 2021, I thought, oh, surely some other gamer professor has tried this, and nope, they hadn't tried building an actual class around this. So yeah, the news of the class went viral, and it got students here really excited, so they signed up in, you know, huge numbers to take this class for the first time. And as soon as the class was done, I thought, well, you know, like, a lot of people around the world are curious about how this game, set of games, I should say, it's not just Red Dead 2, though I do lean into Red Dead 2 a lot more than the first game or Red Dead Revolver. And, you know, I thought, why not turn the class into a book? I'm good at writing books, is what I do, so Red Dead's history. And, you know, very early in working with my publisher, my editor suggested, well, you know, we got to do an audiobook of this, and we should absolutely try to get one of the actors from the game to do the audiobook. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. That's never going to happen, right? That's impossible. Little could I ever guess that the man, the myth, the legend, Roger Clark, Arthur Morgan, in the game.
I do audiobooks. I do loads.
See, this blew my mind. Like, when I learned that Roger had done more than 100 audiobooks.
Almost 200 now.
mine.
I'm going to hit 200 this year.
wow, you're really pumping those numbers up, man.
Oh, yeah. Big reader, yeah.
And lots of history audiobooks, especially, and really freaking good history audiobooks, I should note, Roger. I've listened to many of them in advance of working with you. So,
thanks.
but yeah, the day when Roger responded to our invitation to serve on the project, I was just over the moon. I mean, I was freaking out. You know, like, this is like, they're literally perfect.
I had that same vibe, you know.
So the book,
it's such a great
book's been
book.
out for a couple months now, and I still find myself going back and listening to it just to hear the sort of power and resonance that Roger gives to this text. Like, I wrote the text, but, like, he gives it something that I never had the ability to give it.
Oh, that's very kind. Like I say, a chef is only as good as his ingredients, you know.
The book is available, obviously, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook. With audiobook, you get Roger Clark's voice. With the paperback, you only get your internal voice, which, you know, depending on who you are, might be a plus or negative. But Roger, I wanted to ask you, what made you want to narrate this audiobook? You know, you've done a lot. Is it just kind of like for the grind, or was there something that spoke to you about it?
Oh, obviously I was very interested once I found out it was Red Dead related, and I had met. We had done a few things. We gate crashed one of his lectures, which was a lot of fun. Some really wonderful students over there.
He and Rob Wiedoff came to my class. My students were not expecting it.
Oh, really? Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told them, I'm like, hey guys, today I'm bringing in some outside experts, and then in walks Roger and Rob.
And they actually knew who we were too, which is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you guys open your mouth, that was very, very obvious. But y'all kind of look like your characters a little bit too. So.
When I was looking at the book, I thought this is really, really interesting. And there's so much source material that Tore brings to light that you don't think of, like you were saying earlier when you're playing the game. I just learned so much. I thought to myself, I've got to finish reading this. I might as well get paid for it.
Yeah, right.
And it's been such a joy. It's been such a joy working on it. And like all the things that I've learned since, like with Jim Crow and post-Civil War South and Appalachia, even just to know how to pronounce it properly, Appalachia. I learned so much working on it, and it's been a real joy. And to get to know Tore as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about Red Dead 2 as well. Like everyone imagines it's a Western. They watch the trailers, they watch the sort of promo materials, and they're like, yeah, it's a Western like Red Dead 1. And then suddenly you're in New Orleans. Suddenly you're in like West Virginia, and then you're in like maybe Cuba or something like that, right? It is all over the place.
Yeah.
So it allows me as a historian to like shed light on so many big questions in American history, not just Western history, though I do love Western history and I write about it a lot. It's the whole package, it really is.
It takes it down to the deep South, and you're like, is it still a Western? Which is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Roger, I wanted to ask you, just because, like, Tore and I have been talking in a way where it's kind of like we're fanboying a bit. Do you ever get tired of fanboys? I mean, because it's a pretty big deal to voice a character like that in such a... It should have won Game of the Year, but in such a massive game that's like... It's in the cultural zeitgeist, I think, forever. Do you ever get tired of, like, fanboys or anything like that?
No, not at all. Not at all. And yeah, a lot of people come up to me and says, "Oh, it should have won Game of the Year." Well, we'll just have to be satisfied with over 60 million copies sold, I guess.
Yeah, somehow you'll have to find a way to sleep at night.
It's not easy, Act Man, but after a couple of years, I've managed to find a way. It's a bit of a moral conundrum, but. Obviously, just to be nominated was an honor, and this game's 6 years old.
Roger did win Best Performance that year, which was a big moment.
This game's 6 years old now, and it still has. People are still coming to me saying, "I just finished it," which I don't think is typical, especially in this world now where we're just flung an infinite source of content at us, and the fact that Red Dead has been able to prevail and is still entertaining fans, I'm very grateful for. No, I never get tired of the fanboys. If anyone is going to take time out of their day to tell me how much they appreciated the work of not just me, but everyone who was on that game, which was thousands and thousands of people, it really took a village, then I'm nothing but grateful, absolutely. And I get asked the same questions over and over again, but, I'm happy to answer them, absolutely.
That's also something I kind of worry about is like, well, I don't want to ask him stuff that he's probably been asked 1,000 times already.
It's okay.
Well, because in a way that's somewhat relatable to me as like I have my own audience, and I try to have the same mindset where, if someone's taking time out of their day to message me and they appreciate the work that I've done, I just got to be nothing but humble and grateful for that. Exactly. And just to have the opportunity to be a part of something that has kind of entered gaming zeitgeist is just a pure honor, total honor. And it was a long contract, too. I was 5 years working on that game. So there's multiple angles to, like, our conversation here. You obviously have the historical aspect, but history is sometimes kind of a hard sell to people, especially younger crowds, right? Yep. You tell them, oh, I'm working on this book about, the economic and political landscape of the United States in the 1800s, yeah. And Red Dead Redemption 2. Whoa, what'd you say?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll ask this question of both of you. Why do you guys think Red Dead Redemption is that vessel to kind of get people interested in something that's real? Like real history. What was it about the game?
I think immersion has a lot to do with it. It's such a well-written story, and it's and it's immersive, you know. The difference I often say when you're watching a Western as opposed to playing one is that when we watch stories being told, we're passive audience members, you know. But when you play a game, especially a big open sandbox like Red Dead 2, you're a participant, you know. Your actions directly impact the way that the story unfolds. And so I think it's the immersion into this amazingly detailed world, which is based on American history, that makes it accessible to a whole new audience. Like you say, a much younger bunch of people, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, from the very splash screen text that opens the game, America 1899, right? It declares its intent that this is a historical game, you know, and that got people excited. You know, sometimes, you know, mentioning a particular date in history will make someone, you know, go to sleep or something, but that not in the case of this. So you know, gamers knew that it was going to be exactly what Roger mentioned, right? This vast, interactive, granular world. But I think what people were really impressed with was not just the level, like the kind of homework that the developers did, right? Not just for like weird details. My favorite weird detail is about the shrinking and expanding horse testicles based on the weather, right? Like that's insane.
I was about to say that, yeah. That's absolutely necessary feature.
Right, so they did weird research on that, but then they did a lot of historical research too, right? So like obviously the developers and writers looked at a lot of photographs from turn of the century America, right? I mean, if you look at the streets of New Orleans and the streets of Saint Denis, yeah, of course New Orleans is bigger, but you know, it's almost like a perfect match at times. You look at, you know, a small plantation town like Rhodes with its Confederate memorial, like there's a lot of similarities between that and, you know, some small town in Mississippi in that same time period. So it made a lot of players feel like this is incredibly historically realistic. But what's interesting, of course, is that the developers fictionalized the name of 99% of people and places and institutions. Basically everything except for the Pinkertons is made up. The Pinkertons were real.
And the Pinkertons are the only thing that caused any sort of legal troubles.
Yeah, exactly. So
just shows you what a bunch of bastards they are.
What?
Always causes. They're still causing trouble for the gang.
That's right. So no, I should note that like there are a lot of things that Red Dead 2 doesn't get right. I mean, there's a lot of things that's missing from that world, right? That any person who lived in 1899 would be like, wait, where's politics? Where's the organized labor movement? Where's, you know, so on and so forth. Like those things are not in the game. So I'm not trying to say that Red Dead 2 is history. It's not, you know, a replacement for reading a history book. But boy, it has gotten so many people excited about learning about the things that it references, right? Learning about Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch, which is, in my mind, most certainly the clearest single inspiration for the Vanderland gang. Learning about robber barons like Leviticus Cornwall, right? Like, who was Jay Gould? Who was Cornelius Vanderbilt? You know, these are real people that have real histories that are also tied up to like big problems that are still around today. You know, histories of you know, huge companies that dominate our lives, histories of racial divisions that tear the nation apart. That's an 1899 question. That's a 2024 question as well, right?
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why the games are such a nice springboard into like real history is the characters and archetypes and roles that they fill. I feel like every character in the Vanderland gang is part of some either like discriminated group, or they're an outcast, or like a victim of domestic violence, or they're all kind of like a ragtag group of misfits that don't really fit in anywhere else. And I think because they play as an archetype of the types of real people that probably existed in those times, you know?
Yeah, I think that's something that young people can identify with too, being the outcast. You know, a lot of teenagers, I know I certainly felt that way. But with all the history that it references too, it also references a lot of film and TV and the genre that is the Western, you know? It's the first genre in film. I think The Great Train Robbery was made in like 1900 or something. One of the things I particularly love about Red Dead, and also with Rockstar's other massive franchise, the GTA, is all the little references it does to film. And you're like, I know what the film that's from, you know? And Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is a great example. the dynamic between those two, very similar with what Dutch and Arthur have. Even with that jumping off the cliff, that's straight from the film. And there's a lot of other things too, like the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. There's so many filmic references, even with Arthur's diagnosis of TB. That kind of runs in parallel with Doc Holliday, So it's
they're
this
drawing
big,
from so much.
It's this big hodgepodge mix mesh of
I've come
reality and fiction, and I think it's done very well.
I've come to realize that late 19th century British literature was a huge inspiration too. I was fortunate enough recently to have a Zoom call with Dan Houser, who is one of the lead writers on the game, and he discussed how, things like Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes and Charles Dickens, huge inspiration for some of the storytelling in the game too. So it certainly film and history and, TV shows, but there's a lot of old books in there too.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of references and a lot of stuff I probably haven't gotten. You can play those games for eons, hours and hours and hours, and still not discover everything. One thing I do find very interesting about the character of Arthur Morgan is how he's like the antithesis of your typical Western hero. So while the Western period is often romanticized in American culture, they got the gruff hero cowboy who basically remains the same by the end of the story as he is at the start, or maybe he gets stronger. But Arthur is the opposite. He starts off at his strongest, and over the course of the story he gets weaker and weaker, as if his style of life and the frontier and the Wild West is dying within him as it is in the outside world. I felt that was interesting thematically.
Yeah, absolutely. Westerns, when they first came out, the good guy there was very black and white morality going about, and the good guy always wore a white hat and he did everything that was right, and then when Clint Eastwood came along and with those spaghetti westerns that came with it, we started to see more of an emergence of the anti-hero, the badass who could just as easily murder and kill but still had their own moral compass, And I think Arthur definitely falls into the latter category. But again, he doesn't quite fit it perfectly either. Because as you say, when we share the journey with him and he gets sicker and sicker and it changes his whole perspective on life. And he sees the writing on the wall. And yeah, his sickness and dying is totally a metaphor for the West. Because that's what's happening as well. The West is dying as we play the game, and it's a huge source of conflict. Some people see that its time is coming to an end, and other people refuse to, and that's where a lot of the friction and thematically comes from. But I always really liked that Arthur, once he does have his morality staring at him in the face, he starts to show some vulnerability, and for me, I never saw that in a Western before. I mean, Unforgiven kind of touches on it lightly, because it addresses the huge dilemma it is to take someone's life, and I thought it really dealt with that in a very interesting way, and we hadn't seen Westerns explore that before. But with Red Dead 2, we see Arthur, there's one conversation where he admits that he's scared of dying. I'd never seen a protagonist in a Western say that before. So I was really keen to explore that. I thought that was really cool.
That's also, I think, a fan favorite scene. Like I said, I live streamed the entire game, and so I had people in the comments being like, no, you gotta talk to Sister Calderon. And I was like, why? What's the big deal? And it's like, no, you gotta get this scene.
If you don't do the Brother Dorkins missions in Saint Denis, you don't meet her, and then instead it's a whole different scene where you have Reverend Pearson there instead. And you might not know this, but there is a high and a low honor version with Reverend Swanson, not Pearson, Swanson. It's not that different, but there are slightly different dialogues.
Yeah, how was it recording and acting for basically two sides of the same character? I was always curious about that, because I know what you're talking about with the scene, the two different versions. I think if you're low honor,
3 different versions. So it's kind of mathematical in a way, especially towards the latter half of the story. There would be different scenes depending on which way the player decided to conduct themselves as Arthur, and there's the high honor and the low honor. But when I would get specific pages, okay, this is for when he's high honor, okay, that actually made it a little more simpler. But the real challenge was when the scenes were the exact same. Maybe it wasn't as big of of a scene for the story, you know, and they wouldn't write 2 different versions. And those were the cases where it posed a unique challenge, because I had to, in the back of my mind, be aware that this scene now is the player is either good or bad. So I had to come up with an ambiguous enough version of Arthur so that it would fit either way. And that was an interesting challenge. But it's often we'd draw out these mathematical equations to see where this story branches out depending on what decisions the player would have. And it did get a little confusing at times, but we had a really good team. We were good at it. We figured it out, I think.
I mean, the end result kind of speaks for itself, you know.
I hope so. Yeah, and the fact that people are still enjoying it now just blows me away.
Yeah, I've been working on a series of reviews of the game in which I'd go really in depth on Dutch, John Marston, and Arthur. So like kind of 3 character studies, and it's really difficult to like try to compile all of the different voice lines and get the full picture of the story, because there's just so much of it.
Which voice lines were those? There weren't voice lines. Yeah.
Right.
I've been saying this for 20 years. No, they weren't voice lines. Some of the smaller NPC characters would have done just their work in the booth, but it's full performance capture. So we perform. It's just like what you would do on film, except you're wearing spandex and you look ridiculous.
And then they turn you into an ultra badass in the final
We would
product.
wear spandex, but we still had boots so that our gait and our walk was right, and we'd have gun belts. Every once in a while, we might have a hat, depending if we interacted with it or not. But yeah, we looked pretty crazy. The GTA 5 guys, at least they looked a little more normal, because they weren't wearing cowboy boots. They'd just be wearing sneakers, you know? But we've had spandex with all the balls on, and then cowboy boots and these crazy gun belts. And
Which also meant you had to memorize all these lines. I mean, all the ones that were not in the booth.
It's just like
that's
film.
Insane.
It's just
like film. Yeah.
Yeah, they are 3 incredible, huge arcs, those 3 characters, Arthur, John, and Dutch. And in many ways, Dutch's journey is even more crazy than what Arthur and John go through. Because we see Dutch at the beginning of Red Dead 2. He's a good leader, you know? He's a good guy. He's someone that you get behind and believe in.
You have faith in him.
And then we see him at the end of Red Dead Redemption with the friggin' femur bone in his room, you know? Like, it talks of cannibalism. And how do you get from A to B? But Benjamin Byron Davis and the writers did such a good job that you believe it. You do believe this crazy journey that he takes, being this iconic, rebellious leader to arguably a sadistic cannibal who just is a mass murderer, you know?
He's just lost his mind. I would like to talk about Dutch, because I was reading part of Red Dead's history, and there was something you wrote, Tore, that kind of like gave me an epiphany. Dutch Vanderland's endless dreaming of Tahiti and Cuba to replace the closing American frontier illustrates this instinct. There's some, context before that, but that kind of made me realize like how much the Wild West and the American frontier is romanticized in our culture, and like how people must have had to adapt back then when it's like, yeah, the expansion is over, like we're kind of now we got to civilize all these places and turn it into what's on the east. And the way that Dutch kind of loses that, like expansionists are like, yeah, we're just gonna go west, it kind of like breaks him. He doesn't know what to do. And I think that's like where the true twist is, that he never had a plan because there was no plan to get the frontier back.
Right. No, I mean, his dilemma is not his alone. Many other Americans, particularly well-to-do white men in the U.S., they share that same crisis. Like, if the frontier process is what made America great, which they would have argued in the 1880s and 1890s, what's going to happen when the frontier is filled? Take someone like Teddy Roosevelt. Like, Teddy Roosevelt is obsessed with the West. He's not a Westerner. He's totally from New York City, right? Like, he's totally a city slicker from the East. But he would have, if he was born more recently, he would have loved Red Dead Redemption 2. I can promise you that. But he's so fascinated, with his very romantic and really problematic view of the West, that sees it as this playground for guys like himself. Of course, there were a lot of people in the West already, right? Whether they're native peoples or Chinese immigrants or other settlers, who had less money and resources than him. But, when he believes that the West is closing, he's like, we got to go somewhere else, right? We got to push the frontier outward, or else America is going to stagnate and collapse upon itself. So he doesn't go to Tahiti, as far as I know, but he's really fascinated with like Cuba, with the Philippines, with Panama and the Panama Canal. So like it really inspires him to become an American imperialist, right? Someone who's going to push America's might and resources abroad because he wants a replacement, of the West, like something else to rejuvenate what he saw as manhood and vigor and, the robustness of American, well-to-do white male identity like himself. So I'm just trying to imagine Teddy Roosevelt playing Red Dead 2. I want him on your stream somehow. Someone resurrect him and put him on the Act-Man's show. I wonder what you guys would talk about.
What's the verdict on using AI for dead presidents?
I don't know. His estate might.
That's a tough question.
His estate might put the Pinkertons on you.
Yeah, it's not a tough one for me. Yeah, California's now passed a law. You're not allowed to do it without their consent. I hope the rest of the country follows suit very quickly. Because what's going to happen now is, and it's already happening, is, these elderly people are getting phone calls from their grandkids. All you need is about 5-10 seconds of audio sample to do it. And then they're posting $2,000 to some Venmo account to help out with the bail money. Ooh. So, yeah, I mean, AI has got some really, really useful tools, and it's here to stay. There's no arguing with that. But when it's used to replicate, either characters or real people without consent or permission, that's not a difficult stance for me. I'm dead against it.
Really? I can't imagine why. But how do you feel, Roger, about fans who make their own fan edits with AI and post it to like YouTube? Do you find that along the same lines, or are you talking more of like using AI to replace workers and voice actors and full actors?
Well, I struggle to see the difference. I think impersonations take far more talent. I mean, AI, you're typing into a prompt. I mean, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Although in some ways it can be an original idea, it doesn't really take any skill whatsoever. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan.
For me, right, big fan of Dutch, John Marston, Arthur, right? So what you would be saying is like, hey, work on a good impression and then do it that way, as opposed to taking the easy way out. So. Yeah, I can respect that. I want to ask you guys both a question. It's a very simple one. Was Arthur Morgan a good man?
Ooh, that's not simple. It depends on you play him, I guess. I don't know if he is at the beginning. I mean, he's definitely loyal. He's always loyal to a fault. But I guess it depends on your Arthur, I guess it depends on the way you play him. God knows, I sure did create a few mountains of cops in Saint Denis once I found a nice little corridor,
That they all funneled through.
Yeah, and then, oh dear, my honor's gone down, so then I'd catch a few fish and throw it back again, stuff like that. I guess it depends on how you play him, and that's some of the beauty of the game, is that you have that freedom. But yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't automatically say, yes, he's a good guy. His perspective on life definitely changes once he realizes that he's going to die. And I think it changes for the better. But whether he's a good guy or not, I think totally depends on your playthrough, which I think is kind of cool.
Even if you were to do like the highest honor playthrough, could you still say he's a good man? Because there are certain things that you as the player don't have control over, right?
For example, I will note that the minimum number of people that a high honor Arthur Morgan kills is about 900.
Yeah.
I saw someone tabulate this online, and that number really shocked me. I mean, I'm not that surprised because, I've done that.
They're all bad people, Tore. They're all...
Yeah, those were all bad.
To be honest, the first time I played Red Dead Redemption 2, remember, I haven't played video games for like 20 years, and it's when you go to Valentine, and you're basically forced to beat the crap out of some random dude in the bar. I was like, oh, what is this game? Where is the moral center of this? Arthur Morgan is a horrible person. And I actually was thought about quitting. And a friend of mine talked me into it. He's like, no, the moral arc of the universe bends toward Arthur Morgan, toward, his redemption, if you will. So I stuck with it, and I came to realize that, yeah, despite the 900 bodies, by the end of the game, he's a really fascinating and really, intriguing and maybe even good individual.
He pays the price for his actions, He is held accountable for his actions, to some extent, at least. But yeah, to say that he's good, certainly at the beginning of the game, that might be a bit of an oversimplification, yeah.
Yeah. My idea is that Arthur Morgan wasn't a good man, But he did his best to become one, and that is commendable in and of itself. When reality was facing him, you know, he didn't turn away from it. He embraces it and, you know, does his best to take care of the people he cares about.
And if you were to ask him that,
So-
he doesn't think he's a good man either. He's even at the very end, he doesn't think he's a good man. So yeah, that's a fair point.
Let me give my historical pitch as to why I think Arthur Morgan was a good man. Because no matter how you play the game, basically, you are a ally and defender of people who are on the margins of society, particularly women. Think about the suffrage crusade that you help protect, and people of color in the game, African Americans, Native peoples, right, like the Wapiti. I don't think you can do the main story missions and break with that. And that
Right.
1899 is a moment when ideologies of white supremacy are really, really instilled and central to American society, right? But very few people questioned them, white people, I should say. Some did, like Arthur Morgan, but he would have been on the kind of margins in doing so. He would have been in the minority, and that's awesome, right? Like the fact that, when you run into that eugenicist, that guy distributing all those pamphlets, about breeding in Saint Denis, like, I'm pretty sure you have to punch him.
Yeah. Yeah, if you do, you don't. That's one of the few people in the game, I think, if you do shoot him, your honor doesn't go down.
Them in the clan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you try to beat up the woman, the woman's lib, she's tough as nails. She's like almost as bad as that dude with the raccoon hat in the Valentine bar. Yeah, he's tough. He's tough as nails, and he's cussing everybody off. But once you get that raccoon hat knocked off his head, man, that's...
Oh, he falls apart. I have a funny story about that part of the game, because, you'd go around going, greet, antagonize, and I antagonized him, and then I sat down to get a haircut, and, I was there, customizing my hair for about 5 minutes, and then I'm like, all right, cool, and then I get up, and then I just immediately get clocked by the guy with the raccoon
What? He
hat.
started on you? That's weird. Oh, man.
Yeah, well, because I antagonized
fair
him, and then I think he was
Just
sitting there
waiting.
waiting for me to finish the haircut, and he was like, I'm gonna get him.
That was considerate of him, at least. Nice of him to wait.
Oh, yeah. He destroyed me, but, I had a fresh cut. Roger, I wanted to ask, when you got the job as Arthur, did you know what you were getting into? Did you envision how long the process would be?
So, no. I didn't even know it was Red Dead at the very beginning. I was suspicious, but I wasn't sure. I was only really on about the third audition where I was like, this is Red Dead, isn't it? And they're like, yeah. But the first audition, and it was what they always are. It was called Untitled Video Game Project. They all have the same name at the very beginning, and all they said was to wear boots and to practice on a Western accent. But just by pure serendipity, I just happened to finish Red Dead Redemption about a month before, so that was still very fresh in my head, and I was a huge John Marston fan. I mean, he's the OG. So once I actually realized what the franchise was, then I did feel a little bit of pressure, because I knew how much, spoilers, but I knew how when you play as Jack at the end of Red Dead Redemption, you can't help but miss John. And I knew that once Arthur was announced as the playable character in Red Dead 2, that there was going to be a lot of people who were going to be disappointed. And I totally understood that, So all I was really hoping for and expecting was that it might take as long as GTA 5 did, which was about 3 years. And I was just hoping for it to be as successful as its predecessor. And thankfully, I think we achieved that. But 5 years working on it with being under an NDA, I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because obviously you work in complete isolation. You can't talk about it with anyone. And that, in a way, it was good in the sense that, we had blinkers on, and it was just pure focusing on the work. And we couldn't talk about it with anyone except each other. So we all got really in-depth into the scripts, and we were all, for lack of a better term, we all made sure that we were on the same page and whatnot. But the other difficult bit is that you can't talk about it with anyone. And I was just telling my friends and relatives, I'm working on a video game. I can't talk about it. And then
How many times did you have to say that, I
After 4
wonder?
years, they started going, you still working on that game, Raj? The one that, how long's it been now? It's okay
Yeah.
if you're out of work. You don't have to lie, we still love you. I mean, we know being an actor's hard. I'm like, okay, yeah, fine.
You were telling them, no, just one more year, guys. Just one more year, one more
Whatever
score.
you say, Raj. Yeah, that was fun. And then when the trailer dropped, I got a couple of funny phone calls, that was sure. But I still couldn't confirm it until the day of release. That was when I was finally
right.
That was when most of my NDA got lifted. But yeah, I was just hoping that it would be as successful as the first Red Dead, and thankfully, I think we achieved that. Yeah.
Yeah, that you actually answered one of. I had some viewer questions, and somebody asked what it was like trying to remain secretive under the NDA, and you just answered that. So, hey, Malik, that one was for you. I can't imagine working on a project that massive for that long, and also having to be completely silent about it and not be able to like spill the beans.
I'm kind of glad in a way, as well, because had it been public knowledge that we were working on it, I think that might have been even more pressure, because I probably would have been...
People would have started snooping,
all these emails and phone calls and stuff, and people would have been... in a way, I was glad that, I was grateful for the NDA, because we were able to concentrate on the work a lot more. And of course, NDAs is such a funny thing, but at the end of the day, we just don't want it to be spoiled for the fans. That's really the big reason, is that you don't want the fans to get spoiled ahead of time, and it's so hard to do now. We keep seeing with like Naughty Dog and with the GTA 6 trailers too getting leaked, it's I feel so sad because I know how hard the devs work, and we shouldn't see it until it's ready to be seen, But yeah, NDAs, a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's way better to like have those trailers kind of pop out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And surprise everybody all at once, because then we all have, a similar reaction, as opposed to, oh, yeah, this is going to leak soon, and then Rockstar has to, they have to, change course on how they're doing things to accommodate this, unforeseen
Yeah, the first
obstacle.
time I saw the trailer, it had some fella's Instagram thing just across this, I'm like, this isn't the way it should be seen,
Yeah.
But, so that is the world we live in.
I feel like if Dutch lived today, he would be doing crypto scams.
He might be, yeah. Definitely. Him and Hosea would be in on that too, maybe.
Yeah, they'd be doing crypto scams.
I hear the Tahitian government is very protective of those kinds of policies, so, it might be a good place to do it.
Oh, yeah. That seems like a good place to
El Salvador
set up
uses Bitcoin as its national currency, doesn't it? Or it's one of their legal currencies. Maybe that could be, instead of going to Bolivia, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid did. Although... they went to Bolivia in the film, right, Tori? But where did they actually go? Was it Uruguay?
They spend more time in Argentina. So they buy a ranch in Argentina. There's so many weird parallels between Butch Cassidy and Harry Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid, and Arthur and Dutch, that it's kind of creepy. If folks haven't already watched the 1969 film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, it kind of feels like a weird 60s Red Dead 2 trailer.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out when I have a moment, because, I was reading a book, and it sounds like it's very similar to the Vanderlyn gang.
But the real gang, because it's based on reality, is even in many ways more like the actual, the video game gang that you see in Red Dead.
Butch is the silver-tongued, mentor, and... the Sundance Kid is, got about 15 years younger, and he's the guy with the fast gun and whatnot. There's so many dynamics shared in that story. Yeah.
So I had a couple questions about Dutch and Arthur's relationship, because we talked about his character and some of the deeper themes behind that, but it seems like what we were talking about is Arthur took care of a lot of those outcast, marginalized people. So maybe it was Dutch's influence on Arthur that was the cause of all his negative personality traits, or his meanness. What type of man do you think he would be if Dutch was taken out of the equation?
That's a good question. So I definitely think that Dutch and Hosea were Arthur's mentors. They were his paternal and figures, and they were two very different figures, Hosea in many ways was the voice of reason, more so than Dutch. Dutch was the silver-tongued, leader who would rely on charisma a lot more than morality. And Hosea, he also had charisma, but I think he had much more of his own moral code going. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we see the gang really start to disintegrate once Hosea departs, because that angel over Dutch's shoulder disappears and gets replaced by Micah, as we know. It was no angel at all. So, without Dutch's influence on Arthur's upbringing, I think Hosea would have probably taken the mother load of influencing him, and he might have ended up being... I don't think Hosea would have betrayed him in the ways that Dutch did at the end. It might have been a better relationship. They might have survived. They definitely would have put more of a priority on survival than what Dutch was trying to do, which was just get a lot of money and get the hell out of here. You know, Hosea was, I think, more focused on making sure everybody survived. And, yeah, that's a good question.
I think Hosea has much more of a moral backbone. He's more what I'd call a social bandit, like someone who's interested in stealing but has a real sort of redistributionist vision. Like he wants to see it go to the right people. I mean, I just can't, like that's one of those very early missions when the gang is descending from the mountains down into the, prairie, if you will. They run into these two mounted Native Americans on horseback. And, Hosea, like, suddenly begins this, like, long analysis of, like, land theft and, like, Dutch would not do that, right? Like, Dutch, he gestures toward the kind of, Robin Hood style stuff, but ultimately he wants money for himself, right? Like, Hosea's different. I really think he is.
Hosea is just like, guys, why are we robbing banks? Let's just scam people. It's safer that way. Like, let's just do the crypto scams. We don't have to do the full bank robbery.
If you played as Hosea, I don't think you would kill 900 people. It'd be a lot less.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be, for sure. So, and then banking off of this topic, do you guys think Dutch was a narcissist? Because there's a lot of debate in the community. I read a lot of like fan theories and interpretations. One of the things I really love about these games is not everything is like explicitly stated. So, was Arthur a good man? That's something you can ponder and think to yourself. Was Dutch a narcissist who really only cared about himself? Roger, earlier you were saying he was a good leader. Was he always a good leader, or was it always a facade?
Yeah, very good questions. At the beginning of Red Dead 2, he's definitely someone that you can get behind. But once we get to know him a little bit better, yeah, you can definitely ask the question of how much of that is sincere and how much of it is just serving his own purposes to just maintain control of the Van der Linde gang. There is definitely a decline. And even from before Red Dead 2, we hear about some of the horrible things that he did at the Blackwater Massacre. So I think there was always an edge to Dutch that... this man is capable of doing anything. He is very much... he presents himself as this kind of anarchic lord, who is an ideology that is better than the American government's, But at the end, he backs behind stuff that serves him and serves him only. And we see that more and more as the story progresses. But I think there's a lot of external circumstances that also lead to that as well. I think he starts to decline mental health-wise. He gets a little cuckoo. As Benjamin Byron Davis says, the cheese starts to slide off the cracker. That's a good way of putting it.
That is a good way, yeah. And it's not an instant like boom boom, it falls off. It's a slow sliding, maybe.
And then every once in a while it's 2 steps, he comes back to himself again, like getting Jack from the Braithwaite Manor. He doesn't think twice to get Jack,
I think Guarma is the tipping point for him.
Yeah.
It was the fulfillment of his dream, right? He wanted this kind of distant escape, but he doesn't get it on his terms. Obviously, they're shipwrecked, But yeah, that murder in the cave, that was, for me, that was when things turned. I'm like, this is a repugnant individual at this point. Yeah. That's when the cheese slid right off the cracker for me.
I think that's one of my favorite character moments when, like, you can tell there's really something is going to happen between Arthur and Dutch, and you keep killing people, Dutch.
Very good.
You're going to strangle me next?
And why doesn't he take the gold back off of her? I always ask that question. Why doesn't he take the gold back off of her?
Thought the game was all about realism.
Does he have like a
he
necklace,
gave her
or?
Like the gold bar. It was like the last of Dutch's money to guide us through this place. And then after he kills her, he doesn't loot. As I was playing, I was trying to loot her body. I was like, damn, she's still got some gold, don't forget.
Well, they didn't nail every detail, it seems.
Well, there's so many,
Yeah, I mean,
but they got the horse testicles.
They got the horse testicles.
Yeah.
They didn't pronounce column right. That's always a bug. There's a bug up my ass, but so be it.
Column, like column?
Yeah, it's column.
Really?
Yeah, it's column. Yeah.
Because that's a Irish name, or?
Yeah, it's pronounced Colum. I said, everybody's saying it wrong, right? And they just like, yeah, we don't care. Mind you, though, they hired dialect experts to make sure all the Italian was right, all the Spanish spoken on Guarma, which was kind of a Haiti kind of Dominican Republic thing going on. And of course, all the native languages, too. That was all pronounced correctly. But, when it comes to Colum O'Driscoll, never mind.
Yeah, it's weird hearing him called Colum.
It sounds like they're saying colon.
Yeah.
Sounds like a part of the lower intestines.
Yeah, Colum.
Colum.
So
Colum. Sounds like Andy Serkis in Lord of the Rings. Colum. Sounds like a cat trying to cough up a fur ball.
Yeah. But on that topic, what was it like for you? Because I think I had another viewer question that said you're born in New Jersey but raised in Ireland.
Yeah.
And now you're coming to America to voice like a Southern cowboy.
I really, really, really don't want to be rude, but could you please stop saying voice?
Sorry.
Please.
No, you're not being rude, man. I was more so asking about the accent you had to put on to replicate like a Southern cowboy going from New Jersey to Ireland and then.
So I was working on, I was doing some theater, and one of the fellas from Arizona, his grandfather was from Flagstaff, Arizona, and he would do an impression of his grandfather, and I thought it was hilarious. And so I really started to practice and copy this guy. And then when it was time to do the audition, I threw in a bit more Southern in there, and, because I figured geographical accuracy wasn't that important, because, like you say, I traveled around a lot when I was a kid, and my accent's totally screwed up because of that now. It's to the point where I'm Irish in America, and I'm American in Ireland, and then any other part of the world that Australian sometimes. But so I thought, Arthur traveling around as a kid, he would pick up different bits and pieces on his voyages, and I didn't think that was a problem. Consistency was more important for me, especially over a 5-year period. I was grateful to be able to have such a great team behind me, and they helped me out a lot. But yeah, it's a bit of Arizona and a bit of Southern thrown in there. With little bits and bobs.
I will say, as the historian, that's totally spot on, because we have to recognize that in the late 1800s, most of the white people in the West are Easterners. Like they hadn't been there for very long, and if you were looking at cowboys especially, which I know Arthur's not really a cowboy in any traditional sense, most of the cowboys were Southerners. A lot of them were from Texas. Not all of them were white, to be sure. There were many black and Mexican-American cowboys too, but a lot of them are Southerners. So they would have had Southern accents. So I always thought of Arthur as a Southerner. He doesn't talk about that when he's in the South, right? In the same way that like Lenny, Lenny's a Southerner. He comes from the South, and he talks about his, returning home and being very ambivalent about it. But I don't recall Arthur ever being from a place, which is fine.
He doesn't identify with any one region. But Dutch definitely, he refers to himself as a carpetbagger. He's definitely a Northern Yankee. You can hear it. His father, it's referenced that his father got killed at Gettysburg.
He dies in the Civil War.
Yeah, Roger, because the first time I heard you speak in your normal voice, I was like, whoa. It was jarring.
Oh,
by the way, I really did not mean to offend you. I don't want to start you on a low honor playthrough and take me out.
It's not offensive. It's not offensive at all. It's just something I'm very passionate about, because it used to be all voice acting, right? 15, 20 years ago, that is the way that most games were done. But now, the opposite is more true, So I'm very passionate about raising awareness, because, if everybody thinks that what I did in Red Dead was in a booth just reading off of a script, then, as a professional actor, that's the future opportunities that I'm going to be given, And as a professional actor, I just am keen to keep my pigeonhole as big as possible. So, it's like I was saying earlier, if you're kind enough to come to me and say how much the work meant to you, then the least I can do is make sure that you understand what the work actually was.
Right, because voice acting doesn't even encompass all of the effort and work you put in. So for you to hear
totally
that
different.
Would be like...
It's just completely different to what we did. It's not better, it's not worse. It's just completely different to what we did. It wasn't what we did.
It's what gives the tremendous humanity to that game, and many other games like it. And we were talking about AI previously. If this is a tremendous threat to the industry, it's even more so, if it was nothing but voice acting. Whereas if you're nothing but a voice, then we can replace that quickly. But given that it is a full capture of the human experience, which is what make those characters come alive on the screen so vividly, that the difference matters a lot.
I started out in theater, and I love being able to bounce off of my colleagues in a scene. And in voice acting, you more often than not, you don't get that luxury. Usually you're in a booth just like this, and you're not reading with your cast members. Maybe if you're lucky enough, their session was before yours, and the director has chosen the lines that they want to keep, so maybe you're hearing what they're saying and reacting to it. But for me, personally speaking, it's not the same as being out there on the board, in the volume, performing the scene as you would like with film and theater and television. Like I said, it's just you're wearing spandex and you look ridiculous, and there's pipes and scaffolding.
Pretend to be a cowboy.
Yeah. But had it been voice acting, I think my job would have been a lot harder, because it does tend to be a more solitary art, and my hat goes off. I love voice acting. I don't consider myself to be like as good a voice actor as I am in other mediums, but I love it. I think it's fascinating, but I don't think Arthur would have been the same immersive character had I just been in a booth for 5 years. It wouldn't have been 5 years either. We probably would have gotten it done in half the time too.
Oh, absolutely. And that allowed you to imprint your own movements and things that other actors...
Arthur walks like I walk, even the little idiosyncratisms and all that stuff. I'm very grateful to have been given the luxury to have ownership of that. Everything you see Arthur do is me, except for major stunts. And some of the side missions, myself and Rob Wiedoff would do one, and then I would be ADR it in the booth afterwards, and vice versa. So sometimes, because of the side missions, it could be completed up by either or Arthur John. So sometimes he would do it, sometimes I would do it, and I can always tell, because Rob walks different to me. I can always tell.
Yeah, so I had a viewer question that kind of ties into this. It's from Christopher Cox Film. What was your secret to understanding Arthur? The key trait or motivation about him that the story doesn't show to the audience. What was that process like?
Time helped. I'd never spent so long with a character before. So I would say after the first couple of months, it became a lot easier to slip into Arthur. But at the beginning, I am a huge fan of Westerns. Some of my major influences were, there's this Japanese actor who was in a lot of Kurosawa movies, some of which were the influence and the origin of some Westerns. This guy called Toshiro Mifune. You might know him from films like Yojimbo and Seven Samurai and all that, which in turn were Fistful of Dollars and The Magnificent Seven. And he was awesome. And I just really rated him as a performer. So he was a huge influence, because he could be funny one minute and really dangerous the next, and he had this dry sense of humor that I wanted Arthur to have. Another big influence was Rob Wiedoff, because if nothing else, I knew I couldn't out John Marston, so trying to would be an exercise in futility. I knew that Arthur had to be his own guy, and, let's face it, they're two white outlaws, so they already have a lot in common. So coming up with ways in which to make Arthur unique was helpful too at the beginning. I love Clint Eastwood, but I think there's a lot more of John Wayne in Arthur, because the dry wit. I think John Wayne was also an influence too.
What were some of your favorite scenes and or fellow actors to work with? Which scenes were the most fun for you to film?
Oh man, I loved the whole gang. We became a gang because we worked on it for so long
in real life.
Yeah,
too, yes.
So
art reflects reality, huh?
All the stuff with Benjamin Byron Davis was a joy. He plays his Dutch. The woman who plays Sister Calderon, her name is Irene DeBari. She's a Los Angeles actor. She's also in Undead Nightmare, if some people might not know. Yeah, she's a badass in Undead Nightmare. She blows away some zombies pretty good. No, working with her was a real joy. Graham Greene, who is Rain Falls, he's a legend, and you would recognize him in a lot of other stuff too. He was a real joy to work with. There really was everyone that came into that volume. It was always the same thing, because most people had never done performance capture before, and the first hour of the day was them wetting their feet to that and learning the different nuances of it and whatnot. And they would get it wrong too. They would show up thinking it was voice acting, and then it's on the car ride over there where they realize they actually have to get off book. Man, it used to be fun to see those guys get nervous.
I have to put the spandex on?
What?
Oh, shit.
And they were more worried because if they didn't think they had to learn their lines. Obviously, we wanted them to know their lines, so we would help them out. And but it was always fun to see so many actors wetting their teeth on this brand new medium, And I just tried to make everybody as comfortable as I could, because the more comfortable they were, then I knew the better scene we were going to get.
I can't think of a single, weak link in any of the scenes, dialogue, conversations. Typically in a video game, you'll hear some NPC or something, and you're like, that was pretty shitty delivery right there. But I can't think of a single one in Red Dead 1 or 2.
Yeah, I was curious, Roger, your intensive work with Arthur was now, 6-7 years ago, right? It was a while
10,
ago.
11,
Yeah.
Started at 11 years ago.
I know, it's crazy.
Wow.
What did it feel like this spring returning to the Western cowboy in doing the audiobook for Red Dead's history? And it's weird too, because you're talking about Red Dead Redemption. Like those are 3 words that never come out of Arthur Morgan's mouth, but
That's
they
right.
come out of your narration for the book. What was it like kind of returning in this kind of meta way to do the audiobook?
It was a joy. It was a real joy, especially because I know everybody hears the audiobook and they go, oh my gosh, that's Arthur. But in many ways, I was not thinking that I was narrating it as Arthur. I was just this pseudo kind of Arthur that's taking you on this journey that you wrote, Tore, and that's the way I was kind of viewing it, is Arthur is kind of your tour guide for all the historical context, which Dr. Olsson very expertly put together. So I kind of didn't see it as a return to Arthur. But in many ways, he's a part of me now, and I don't think he's ever going to leave. And I'm totally happy with that. It was the contract of a lifetime, and I'm just so grateful to even have had the chance to be part of something that's enjoyed by so many people. But to be able to, the fact that amazing professionals and academics such as yourself are still analyzing and studying this game, and that I'm invited to be a part of that is just really awesome.
It's the Oregon Trail of this generation.
Exactly. Yes.
It really is. And a much
now
better message.
Yeah, no more dysentery. It's TB now, yeah.
Yeah. Lumbago and TB.
Lumbago's a very serious condition. Yeah.
Yeah, don't make fun. But no, you guys are kind of a killer combo, because you've got the history professor and the actor from the game combining your talents to have Arthur basically give a history lesson. And that's how you sell people on history.
History is super fascinating, right? Like, there's such a nasty stereotype that it's just this dead collection of names, dates, presidents, and wars. But it's this epic drama that it was totally unscripted. We didn't know what direction things were going to happen in. It's tremendously violent. American history is bloody, especially in that late 19th century moment. And if the game is going to, get people passionate about it, I say that's awesome, right? Like, historians should do more to engage people's passion and enthusiasm for, a fictional work of pop culture like Red Dead 2 and, any Red Dead game.
Yeah, one of the reasons why your message stood out so much is because, like, a book on a video game and the real history behind it, you don't typically see many books like that. And there's not many games that you could write books like that about.
No, absolutely not. I remember when Klingon was being taught in college. I thought that was insanely cool. The fact that you could take a course in college and learn Klingon. And I think you can do it with some of the Elvish in Lord of the Rings, too. I thought that was amazing. But this is even better.
One of the really cool things about it is that for each chapter that you wrote, you have an element of the Wild West, the American frontier, and you also have its equivalent in the game. You talk about the Indian Wars, which I thought was really fascinating about, like, what their role during that time was, and then you relate that to Charles Eagle Flies and the Wapiti tribe. And you do that for everything, like a railroad tycoons and those corporate businessmen in Leviticus Cornwall. And also, like, there's all those quests where you track down the different gunslingers, and
Yeah.
And then it makes you curious, like, well, who were the real gunslingers? And so I really loved the structure of the book. It's turning into a book club right now.
Oh.
But the way it's structured is you can kind of just jump between chapter to chapter and read about whatever aspect of history is most interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes it was really obvious what the real historical inspiration was. Like New Orleans, Saint-Denis, totally, there's no sort of confusion about that. I always thought that, the Wapiti were modeled after the Lakota Sioux of the Dakota territories. But then there's more confusing things like West Elizabeth. What exactly is that? Well, there's no neat equivalent to it. My book is not, as you know, right, it's not a sort of encyclopedia of the real world equivalents. It's more about, like, what are the big dilemmas of this period? Why are people shooting each other? Why, was Wild Bill Hickok gunning people down in the streets of Abilene, Kansas? And try to fill in the answer. And a lot of it, is different from those Hollywood epics that we've seen. A lot of it's about politics. A lot of it's about capitalism. And I like it because Red Dead 2 does gesture toward that, right? I mean, they do make big social dilemmas part of the story. They're not as central as it actually was, but they try. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it fleshes out all of the gang members, right? It's also pretty funny, the idea of Arthur going to a women's suffrage rally,
Yeah, they need me alive.
Yeah.
How many AAA video games feature not just the question of women's suffrage, but women's suffrage in the Deep South in the 1890s? Like, that's so cool that they went there.
Yeah.
Can't think of any, to be honest. So yeah, I think I have maybe one last question. I wanted to ask you guys, do you think it's possible to make a Red Dead 3?
I'd be very surprised if they don't. It's so successful. I have no inside knowledge about it, and even if I did, I would tell you that I don't.
Right.
But I would be very surprised if we don't see another Red Dead Redemption. Or maybe, in a slightly different format. Remember, Revolver, the granddaddy of them all, is pretty much, as far as the narrative is concerned, is completely separate from Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. So maybe it's not the same characters, but the same world, and maybe some of the characters that we've grown to love in these two games, make short cameos in the next one. But I think they're busy with a little game called GTA 6 at the moment. But I'd be very surprised if we've seen the last of Red Dead Redemption. But whether or not Arthur or the Van der Linde gang is involved in that, your guess is as good as mine. I could think just as easily they don't, Because it's such a wonderful world, and one thing that Rockstar are excellent at is introducing new characters, and making us all fall in love with them. So, yeah, I definitely see it. It was too successful not to pursue, but I think it might be a while.
So in my book, my epilogue is like my view of what Red Dead 3 should be. And it's basically set between Red Dead Revolver, which is an 1860s game, and Red Dead 2. So I'm thinking 1870s. Because 1870s is such a turbulent decade in the U.S. It's much more wild than anything going on in 1899, to be sure. So if they want to showcase a lot of violence and unrest, well, the early 1870s would certainly be that moment. And I'd love for us to catch Arthur as a young man, Hosea as a young man, maybe Dutch, playable Dutch. That would be pretty cool.
Landon Ricketts.
Oh, Landon Ricketts, there you go.
Yeah, Landon Ricketts, he'd be in his prime then.
He's definitely one of my favorites from the first game. Mentor to John.
He was such a cool character, and I think that actor has since passed away, but that guy,
Yeah.
I didn't work with him, but I remember Rob telling stories about it. And that actor was in, I believe, one of the original Planet of the Apes movies.
No shot, really?
Yeah. Even the one, that makeup still holds up, doesn't it? And I remember our director at the time, Rod Edge, he was asking him about it. He says, "What was it like?" And he says, in his typical Landon Ricketts voice, he says, "It was just like this. We'd put ridiculous stuff on and try to act,
Yeah, just like this. So then, what does the future hold for both of you guys? Any interesting projects you're working on? Where do you go from here? Red Dead has kind of been covered, and you wrote the book on its history. Where do we go from here, fellas?
Sure, yeah. I've got some games coming out. Some of them I can't talk about, but I do have Rosewater coming out next year, and there's another one called Evolutus Duality coming out next year. I've got a horror feature coming out in January, which was a lot of fun. We filmed that up in New England. And there's still a lot of audiobooks, thankfully, to be done. So yeah, I can't believe I'm still working. I pinch myself so often that I'm black and blue up and down my arms. But I'm just grateful for the chance to still be working and to still have work that challenges me. And the fact that I'm here now, still talking about a job that I finished 6 years ago, is an honor. It's an absolute honor. That's all any artist really wants, is for their work to be enjoyed, and I have that. So I am a blessed man. And
we are blessed to have you. Let me just say that we are blessed to have you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, and working with you, Roger, on this project was just a dream come true. It was unbelievable.
I really enjoyed it, Tore. It's an excellent book. I learned a lot reading it, and it's so well done. And I know that there's a lot more in there, and I know that we're going to see a lot more work from you to come. And your students over there at University of Tennessee are very lucky.
Well, thanks.
It was
super fun.
I've actually started teaching a bit at Quinnipiac. I was doing mocaps, teaching mocap for like developers and gamers and game developers. And Tore was very helpful to me. He was giving me a few pointers on doing my first lectures and stuff, because I was a little nervous, I'm not going to lie. Yeah. But Tore
we're both professors now, right?
You've got a few more initials after your name, but yes, thank you. It's an honor to be held in the same. Yeah.
Yeah, where were the professors like you when I was in school, man?
I went to drama school. I had some cool teachers. I had to drama school, so there were some cool teachers. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, I bet drama school has the best teachers.
They are pretty cool, most of them. Some of them are actually really strict, though. Like, telling you diction and making sure you speak properly. But some of them are really cool as well.
Yeah, history is just one of those topics where, like, depending on the professor, it'll make or break the class, right? If it's just endless lecture. But Tore seems like he's got a lot more energy, pep in his step, kind of.
Yeah, and I had so much fun doing this project, and it convinced me that video games are such a powerful way to get wide audiences to care and ask big questions about history. So I am going to do it again for a different game franchise. I'm starting with another experimental class.
Awesome.
Teaching it in the spring of 26, working hard on it right now. And I'm going to go more closer to the current moment. I'm going to delve into America since about 1980. Because I think something really changes in America with the election of Reagan and the kind of embrace of this hyper-capitalist, free market capitalism that really kind of comes into high gear in the 80s and 90s and into the present day.
Awesome.
So I really want to narrate the last 50 years of American history. I'm not going to say exactly what franchise I'm using, but I will mention that it's been developed by the same people who made Red Dead Redemption 2.
That's obvious. That's obvious now, Tore. I can't wait to see your take on San Andreas, though. That would be epic, man. That would be epic.
Oh, yeah.
I'm playing, I'm taking notes, I'm reading a ton of books.
You're watching,
stay tuned.
Watching Miami Vice? Oh, I can't wait. That's awesome, Tore.
Yep, I'm very, very excited about it, too.
Soon you'll have your own shelf of video game history and lore,
Cool, man.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. Did my best to conduct this interview as best I could,
You were awesome, man. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I love the Dutch outfit. It's fantastic.
Thank you. It's even though I'm like a YouTube personality and people have like that fanboy reaction, it's like I still get that with people that I really respect and admire their work.
Yeah, thanks, Ackman. This has been super fun. You're such a great host. Brilliant questions, thoughtful reading of the game, of the book, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. And if you want to check out the book, link will be in the description, pinned comment, all that jazz. And as will their socials, so feel free to follow them, check the book out, highly recommend it. And yeah, we'll look forward to what you have to say on Grand Theft Auto. There's a lot to dive in there.
Oh, so much.
So thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this incredible interview with Roger Clark and Tore Olsson. Like I said, you can find links to Red Dead's history in the description and in the pinned comment. By the way, I was not paid anything for this. I just thought the book was really cool. It was an opportunity to talk with Roger. And I think if you're into Red Dead Redemption, you should consider checking out the book as well. We did have limited time, so I didn't get to ask him all the questions I wanted, but I got a few viewers in there. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the interview. Leave a like if you did, and subscribe to The Act Man for more awesome content. All right, everyone, that's all I got for today. This is The Act Man signing out. Peace!